All right, looks like we are live. Welcome to Leaving Young Earth Creationism, except it's not Leaving Young Earth Creationism because I haven't heard from my guest that I scheduled this with in, I don't know, 3 days. So I also talked to someone who knows him personally, and no contact there. So instead, we're going to talk about the discussion that Erika had with Dr. Rana from Reasons to Believe. Erika is on her way to get here, although I've heard that before, and she got lost in the woods, so you never know, right? But hopefully we'll also be joined by a few other people who are in sort of the regular science team. So, yeah. So unfortunately, no leaving YEC. I have no idea what happened with that guest. I'm a little annoyed at having 2 guests in a row ghost the show. It's extremely frustrating. I'll just say that. And also, it looks like Mr. Batman, who I was trying to get set up for a discussion on modern day debate for this Thursday evening, is also ghosting James. So, yeah, I don't know. I told James if he can get someone else to have that same discussion, I would be happy to go on for some other discussion about the same topic with a different person. I don't hugely care who it would be, as long as it's someone who disagrees and who is capable of having a conversation. So there's very few people I won't talk to live like that. I think the only 2 that come to mind are Faithful, Honest, True, and Nephilim Free. They're not worth anyone's time to have a conversation with because they're incapable of having conversations. So there you go. But anyway, now that this is a after show for the Gutsick Gibbon Fuzz Rana, I don't want to call it a debate because it really wasn't much of a debate. It was really more of just a discussion, right? It was a conversation that they had.
Yeah, it was actually quite pleasant conversation, and I would suggest people go watch it because it's less brain aneurysm like, say, Jackson's debate 2 days ago, and much more actual thought-provoking conversation.
Yeah. Well, one of the things is that's nice with the talk with Fuzz Rana is that he's not someone who's just going to straight up deny the actual facts that are just incontrovertible. Like, he's not going to sit there and say, oh no, chromosome 2 doesn't look like a fusion site, when it looks exactly like what you would expect a fusion site to look like. That's not his shtick. Now, he has odd ways of interpreting the evidence, and I think his ideas have serious problems with parsimony. But yeah, he's still much higher level in terms of his knowledge of the field and the reasonableness of his ideas than a lot of the people that we've been encountering. So would you even consider Hovind? Yeah, if Hovind wants to come on Modern Day Debate again, I'll be there. That's fine with me. In fact, I would even do the same debate again and see if he's managed to figure out what a dinosaur is yet, because spoiler alerts, I don't think he has.
I don't know, maybe he'll have the same Freudian slip as last debate.
Oh, when he said I'm moving the goalpost?
Oh, no, the one he had a Freudian slip and said millions of years instead of 6,000.
Oh, yeah, he did that too. Those were 2 interesting things. And Vandelli 1990 says, Mr. Dox, yeah, so Ken Hovind does have a bit of a problem with trying to dox people, which I'm not a huge fan of. But
interestingly, apparently he didn't try to he didn't ask for the information he asked from you and Erika with Dan, which is interesting.
Well, also at that time, Dan introduced himself as Dan Stern Cardinal.
Right. One of the things is it's hard to dox Dan because as a professor, at least his place of employment and full name are public record.
Yeah.
No. But yeah, it was a nice change of pace seeing a actual productive productive, but at least an interesting back and forth that was genuinely respectful of the ideas being presented. And there assertions of that's just an evolutionary assumption.
Yeah, or just saying the things that are basic facts about reality are quote unquote rescuing devices. Like that's
Or doubling down on your position that Havlis is a artificial species.
Yeah, even though no one thinks that, there's no reason to think that all the evidence says it's a real thing. Yeah.
Even the people that have issues of habilis either say that it's multiple hominid species, or that it's one of the older positions is that it was more likely to be Paranthropus boisei, because that's found in the exact same area.
No, it's discussions about them being, more distinct subspecies and not being a legit fossil.
Yeah, but there's no paleoanthropologist from what I can see that think habilis is not a real thing.
So, Thinkbox Dictator has an interesting question. So it says, I haven't seen a debate, but if there was some argument about left-right-handedness of molecules, Steve Moll just made a video, Homochirality, Why Nature Never Makes Mirror Molecules. And so I don't believe that came up in the debate itself. I just watched most of it while I was hoping that my original guest would get here. And I think that's mostly because they didn't really get into abiogenesis all that much, because it really was a question about evolution. And so abiogenesis is one of those things where, like, I'm interested to know how life started, but I don't particularly care how it started all that much. Like, any option that turns out to be true, okay, that's fine. And it's one of the reasons why I tend not to discuss it in debates or really on my channel, because it's one of those things where it's like, okay, you want to say God poofed life into existence via miracle? Okay, fine. You want to say it was, an RNA world, or metabolism first, or any of these things? Like, it doesn't really matter to me which one it is, because the fact is, life got here at some point. Everyone agrees with that. Even the creationists agree life got here. At some point, there was no life, then there was. The question that I find interesting, and that we can actually know things about at this point in our scientific understanding, is what happens after, and how far back can we trace ancestry. We can answer those questions. They aren't just up in the air. We can get actual legitimate evidence behind these. So those are the things that I like to talk about. It's also why I tend not to talk about things like politics and religion, because I don't have a great way to just say, oh, this is definitely the right answer to this political question or this religious question. Because, what would it be? But I do want to say, overall, I want to go and ask first Dakota and then TD Lane what they thought of the discussion, what they thought of Erika's points, Dr. Rana's points, and then I'm going to ask the same question for TD Lane. So, Dakota, what did you think?
As usual, when Erika talks about her subfield, I always learn something that I've either hadn't seen before or had forgotten, because I'm not an anthropologist. But it's always fascinating her going through the human clade and discussing it in detail. And it was just as for Rana, like it's again, I like seeing older Earth creationists, because they at least have arguments that don't rely on the rejection of basic physics.
Yeah, that is, and as a progressive creationist, yeah, it's not impossible for him to be right.
Yeah.
Which is a huge step up from young Earth creationism, where it's literal nonsense. Like, it's not even internally coherent.
Yeah, progressive creation could actually be a thing. It's
without
its predictive power is
Yeah. So, what about you, TD Lane? What's your overall take?
From what I remember, as I was playing DayZ with Dakota for one. From what I remember from half listening is Erika did rather well. I found when abiogenesis was being discussed, it was actually quite interesting. And I also found the general discussion to be fruitful. It wasn't like, say, a screaming match or the one party just not understanding. It actually had flow and movement and not just flat denial of things. Yeah, I think Erika did well. I think Rana like actually well, which is something I cannot say often about a creation versus evolution debate.
Yeah, the most I usually can say is that the creationist was polite. I can say a lot more than that this time. I think Fuzz Rana actually represented his position well. He was clear. He was coherent. It overall was a good discussion. I do think, though, one criticism I would have for Dr. Rana, not that he's ever likely to see this. Well, I might have a way to get it in front of him. I don't know. He probably won't see this. But my one big criticism would be that it's very hard to get a handle on what his actual claim is regarding things like common ancestry. Like, it seems like he was willing to just kind of go with that, I'm not going to take much of a position on a lot of things. Like, if you try to nail him down, like, okay, Dr. Rana, are horses and dogs related by common ancestry? Do they share a common ancestor? I don't know that you would actually get a position. I think he might just not even bother. Just be like, I don't know.
Yeah, I think the same. Like, the feeling I got was like, okay, so he kind of thinks that like the Precambrian, pre-Eucharan really, was like just God tinkering with microbes, and then he started tinkering with macroscopic and the Ediacaran and stepped it up to 11 and Cambrian. And like on common ancestry, from what I could tell, he thought like upwards of genus or family was kind of where common ancestry could go, but it was very vague, I think, as far as common ancestry went with Rana.
Yeah, and it was a little frustrating because while overall, like I said, he was much more knowledgeable and much less basically flat earth level of insane than you usually get from young earth creationism. Because let's be honest, young earth creationism is about at the same intellectual level as flat earth. I mean, there's just nothing there. All that there is misunderstanding of science and flat denial of reality. But with his old earth position, it was much less like that, but it was also sort of frustrating because generally speaking, with a lot of the young earth creationists, I know what their position actually is, right? It's like, do young earth creationists usually accept, say, common ancestry for even relatively close related groups like Arctoidea? The answer is no. They usually would say that, mustelids or maybe musteloids might be one kind, and then, seals are going to be another one, and bears are going to be another one. Like, oh, okay. I mean, it's kind of silly because there's literally no reason to separate them out that you can give me that's objective, but at least you're going to take a stance there, even if the exact place we're going to cut that off is a bit unclear. But then we get things like on this side where it's like, well, maybe, Homo sapiens evolved naturally from a physical standpoint, but then God specially created an Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden, to whom he gave, the image of God. And then they were biologically compatible with the other humans, which, by the way, I mean, let's be clear about what Dr. Rana means about that. He basically means that there were a bunch of Homo sapiens who essentially didn't have souls, who the soul-having Homo sapiens then went out and had sex with to produce future soul-having babies. So it's a weird sort of thing, and I'm not sure how it coheres with typical Christian mores concerning sexuality, but I don't know. And from Nestling 20, I also have a problem with Dr. Rana's tendency to have his position constructed in a slippery way. Like, I have watched a stream where he claims that SARS-CoV-2 was designed maybe... Yeah, Dr. Rana can be frustratingly vague in some ways. It's... On the one hand, it means that it's very hard to say, oh, nope, you're definitely wrong about this. But on the other hand, it's also very hard to say, like, what are you actually trying to get across? Now, maybe it's just because I haven't read any of his books, and maybe in his books he's much more clear about exactly what he believes. I don't know.
I feel like that'd be a question for RJ were he awake. But like, yeah, during when he was talking about the Cambrian, I was like, are you like trying to claim that look at all this life suddenly appear? Because it's not really suddenly, but again, like, what's the actual claim here?
Yeah. Well, see, that's one of those other things, because in the debate, he said that he found it hard to see how body plans could develop. But the thing is that a body plan it's ultimately arbitrary what parts of the anatomy count as quote unquote the body plan, right? Because if you were to go back to the beginning of the Cambrian and watch these things diversify, you would see organisms making subtle changes to already underlying quote unquote body plans that had emerged from, say, the Ediacaran. So is bare bilateral symmetry a body plan? Because at the base of bilateria, that's basically what you're doing, is you're elaborating just slightly on basic bilateral symmetry. Is segmentation a body plan? Well, almost every bilaterian is segmented. I mean, humans are segmented. Most arthropods are segmented. It's basically like, what isn't segmented? Mollusks, as far as bilateria goes. So that's one of those things that always bugs me a little bit, is because when you get down to the very basal members of these phyla, the reason that the phyla are so-called being established is because at that point they're so similar that any slight change spread over the course of 500 million years is going to look like some kind of huge fundamental shift in body plan when you look at their modern descendants. But if you looked at the basalmost members of, say, any given two phyla that are in, say, bilateria, they actually don't look all that different.
And
I've actually got some questions from Just a Walking Fish, but I need to read out a comment he just said. At least he didn't claim there was 70 living land phyla in the Cambrian.
Oh, yeah, ouch. That is...
yeah,
smoking yeah, they're... Did he go with 70? There aren't even that many animal phyla total, are there?
No.
And is there even a single phylum that's completely terrestrial?
I don't think so. No, I'm pretty sure all of the phyla have aquatic members. But okay, so his technically two-part question: does Rana believe in faunal succession or global flood? So, Just Walking Fish.
Okay, I don't know what he thinks about the global flood. I don't think they didn't really even talk about it. It just didn't really come up. And I do know that Fuzz Rana he's sort of a fan of the Richard Owen progressive creation. So there is an idea that there's this faunal succession that's real and it exists, and it actually happened. But when an old fauna leaves the geological record and a new one comes in, then there's some idea that there's additional creative activity by God, and it's not well defined what form that takes. And because Rana he's very fuzzy on what can be accounted for by common ancestry, as well as how much common ancestry and natural processes can explain in terms of the actual morphology and biochemistry of organisms. It's not clear if he thinks... I don't even know that he would find himself convinced either way, whether or not this faunal succession is being driven by the special creation of new organisms that resemble previous ones, or if it's actually evolution happening. And if it's evolution, is it being directed in some kind of supernatural way? How so? To what degree is this just the outworking of natural selection and mutation and other things like gene flow, genetic drift, sexual selection, all those things? Because that's the frustrating thing about Dr. Rana, is I don't know what his position is on most things, because he doesn't really give one. He seems to really only give strong positions when it comes to humanity. He has a very narrow definition of what counts as human. And basically it comes down to not just Homo sapiens. He's more specific than that. Not all Homo sapiens are human, according to Fuzz Rana. Archaic Homo sapiens, he says, are not human. It's only Homo sapiens sapiens after the point at which he says that God would have imparted the imago Dei. So that seems to be sometime around the advent of the Neolithic, because that's when we start seeing Homo sapiens technology starting to significantly progress. That's where we start getting like the first instances that humans might be not quite farming, but doing some food cultivation. Like they might be intentionally planting fruit tree seeds in a few places here and there, not in a concerted, organized way. But that's also where we start seeing actual significant improvements in, the kinds of stone tools and whatnot.
Yeah, like that reminds me, like in the debate he was basically he went on about how humans have this like rapid advancement, and I'm just thinking, did they though?
Yeah. Now
the Neolithic's a good 30,000 years, 35,000. And
I also want to point out, so Smitty says, sounds racist. And I think, so I'm not actually sure on what basis he's doing this, because it doesn't seem like there's a big biological difference that he imagines between these humans with the imago Dei and the ones who don't have it. It seems like it's mostly just some kind of spiritual exercise that God performed in his special creation of Adam and Eve. And
it seems theological.
And I don't think he thinks that there are currently any groups of Homo sapiens that aren't what he would call human. So Megan Fox Giant Boobs says, so he believes that God created humans and then gave them souls. That seems to be one of the options he's going with. But it also seems like, so he acknowledges the interbreeding that occurred between Homo neanderthalensis, Homo denisova, and Homo sapiens. So he seems to think that there were populations of animals that he wouldn't call humans that were biologically similar enough to modern humans that he would consider humans to breed with them successfully. And it seems like his idea is that the imago Dei is essentially, while it might not be physically genetic, it has an inherited character. So if one or both of your parents have it, you've got it. And he identifies the imago Dei, the image of God, with things like the capacity to use symbolic representation for ideas and a language capacity.
All the art, all the decorations, all the I think to answer this question you just posed, basically you would say whichever one can do art and feel and do all the more art,
he's pretty clear that the imago Dei idea is very strongly linked to evident cognitive function, and that's why he kind of ties the occurrence of actual humans, according to him, to changes in our archaeological record, from basically going from the Paleolithic, where there's essentially a standstill in human technology. And look who's here!
Extremely slow progression.
It's the woman of the hour.
Hey, what's up, you guys?
Oh, we're just having an after show for you because I had a second guest just ghost me.
Yeah, what happened with that?
I don't know. So a few days ago, earlier this week, I think Wednesday, he sent me a picture to use as a thumbnail. And then Thursday, I believe, I sent him back. I was like, hey, this is what I'm going to use unless this is a problem. And I haven't heard anything since. And I was very clear before he stopped messaging me that, we would go on at noon, half an hour or so before. That's when I'm going to start the call so we can go over pre-show stuff. I sent him the join link at about 11 a.m. Pacific. So saying, hey, you've got an hour or so before the show starts. I'm going to be in here at about, 11:30 a.m.
Right.
And just nothing. And Eric Vierthaler knows him personally, and Eric has not been able to get a hold of him either. So
I wonder what happened. Maybe it was like a family thing, you know? People tend to, maybe stuff just, I don't know. I try to give people the benefit of the doubt, but unless, of course, you're Mr. Batman, in which case you don't get the benefit of the doubt because we caught you doing a live after show.
Mm-hmm. Oh, and he's ghosting James right now, too. He's not responding to James.
I saw that on Twitter.
I don't know, maybe the guy, I don't know, warp traveled the Gellerfield off.
Well, that would be unfortunate. So Jerry Penna, a guy named Dylan, who goes by Rational Radio online, was supposed to come about leaving Earth creationism. Since that hasn't happened, we're just transitioning into a Fuzz Rana Erika discussion after show. The link to the original, I don't want to call it a debate.
I just definitely wouldn't call it a debate at all. Like, it was genuinely just a very fun chat. I love Fuzz. He's awesome.
Yeah. Well, that's one of the things is like sometimes we say, oh, I don't want to call it a debate because it was just like a crazy dumpster fire of nonsense. But this was not a debate in the best way, where it was an actual genuine conversation between people who seem honest and people who aren't going to just deny reality flat out.
Oh my God, yeah, huge credit where credit is absolutely due with Fuzz. I mean, like on some of the stuff that he was, that, you know, for other people it would have been kind of an inference that they're kind of putting a scriptural, religious reasoning first. Fuzz was just like, no, yeah, I'm totally doing that. Like for some of the stuff, he was like, this is the outlook that I'm using, and I can respect that. Yeah,
I can at least say you're being honest about it. You're not pretending that someone who does not start off with this assumption about the scripture is going to come to your conclusion.
No, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. It was very enjoyable too, just like getting into some of the minutia of what he thought. Because, you know, while I feel that I'm more informed, I still feel that there are some kind of mysterious aspects of kind of Fuzz's point of view. And I don't think it's mysterious intentionally. I think he's just genuinely trying to sort out kind of what he thinks, and mad respect for that. Like he's genuinely just trying to work through his own model of how he, you know, the lens by which he views science and the world around him. And he's a massive professional in his field. So, you know, it's not like he's doing this blindly. So good on him.
Erika, I just want to say, when you brought up how everything in the Cambrian is really weird, that was brilliant.
Yeah. Oh, thanks, TD. Yeah, well, because that's the thing. It all is. All of it is just Bizarro Town. Like it's all of it is, you know, there's a reason why I used the example of like it's evolution or nature or God, whoever you want to, you know, pin it on. It's their DeviantArt phase. It's a bunch of random BS thrown at the wall trying to figure out what would stick. I mean, Opabinia is just like a tube with a million legs just hanging out doing its deal.
And 5 eyes.
Yeah, and 5 eyes and like a weird little proboscis pincer thing.
Yeah.
Actually, I'm not going to send the link to it because it's on a different channel that is not associated with Dapper Dino. But until Dapper Dino, one of by far my most viewed video on YouTube was a little quick animation I did of Opabinia just as a little practice on Blender. And I made a little cartoon Opabinia, and it swam around in a very unrealistic way.
I'm going to find it because I want to, but I won't share it with the chat because I'm mean.
I mean, you can try to find it. It's out there.
But like, yeah, the Ediacaran biota is weird too. It's like the weird precursors to the weird stuff that then was preceded by some slightly more normal stuff.
Well, and that's the thing. I feel like it almost is like the Ediacaran is like, okay, we have a bunch of fleshy mats and fronds and fractals and things that are basically just slurping up sludge and hanging out at the bottom of the sea, in shallow and in deeper areas. And then the second we have any kind of novelty in body plan, there's just an explosion of like weird shit popping up everywhere. Now we say explosion because geologically it is an explosion, but biologically it's just not. It's a slow burn biologically. You can very clearly separate out pieces of the Cambrian and look at where things start to get a little weird, where they really ramp up into weirdness, and then where novel, weird body plans are overtaken by more efficient ones.
Yeah. And also, in some cases, it might not even just be more efficient. It might just be luck of the draw.
True. No, that's absolutely true too. Especially considering that the Ordovician, which was ramping up right afterwards, was about to cull pretty much everything that wasn't, a super fit, super lucky individual or population, I guess you would say.
It turns out it's like the Cambrian stuff that was still able to adapt and was good enough was still around in the Ordovician, but gone by the end.
Yeah. No, and so the thing too about Fuzz, I think that he has put a whole lot of thought into origin of life stuff in various points during his life. But like anyone who's researching something, that they find that they have any interest in, some periods you have more time than others to really dig into it, which is why I kind of felt like he really knew that clay, the RNA polymerization on clay experiment cold. But at the same time, some of the newer stuff, like the wet-dry cycle proposal for nucleobases, he was like, yeah, I haven't really read that one yet. And that was like a relatively recent paper. Now, I haven't read it either, but I'm also not a big origin of life person. I don't really care too much about it. So I think it's just because he's writing a book right now. And, I'm sure that's sucking up a ton of his time. But I really wish that he had read it so that I could get his thoughts on it. He had some off the cuff, here's what I can imagine the problems would be for wet dry cycles with regard to getting the organization for RNA. But I couldn't counter it either. I couldn't be that seems like something that it seems like something that they would have accounted for. But at the same time, I have no idea. So he seems really in depth into a lot of those origin of life studies and actual methodologies, for sure. But someone in the comments or someone who had super chatted him mentioned that was just because we don't have origin of life necessarily completely figured out, then that's something that I don't think we'll ever really figure out truly. But it doesn't mean that you have to insert God there, I guess.
Yeah. Well, that is one of those things. It's currently an open question, which makes it easy to insert God, but it also doesn't mean that is actually the right answer. I also want to say we got a 50 kroner super chat from Danish Debater, who says, just really want to show my support to Dapper and Erika. Erika, this was one of the most enjoyable... I can't talk today. This was one of the most enjoyable debates in a long time, for the good reasons, by the way.
I couldn't agree more, Danish Debater. I honestly was shocked when James was like, yeah, we need to start wrapping it up. And I was like, damn, I really wish we didn't, because I was just having so much fun, getting to talk to a biochemist who genuinely has different opinions than me, for different reasons, So it's he's coming at it completely from abiogenesis seems somewhat implausible to me as a biochemist, and I'm coming at it from an angle of once you get into macroscopic stuff, there's just if it's not evolution, it's something that looks identical to it.
I want to address this real quick because Dusseldre says, I hate hearing science-minded people constantly saying, I don't care about the fundamental origins question. And it's not so much that I don't care, and I think everyone here cares, is that I don't have a pet theory to attach myself to, and so I'm not willing to debate it because I do not know enough about it, nor does any particular theory carry any, I don't have any emotional attachment to any of them.
Yep.
They could all be completely wrong, and that won't bother me. But once we figure out that something is right, then I will care about that, because then I will want to look into what is the evidence behind it, why do we know this is right, and stuff like that.
Well,
so
from another perspective too, Dapper, is that it's okay, I study primates. Primates are the mammals of choice that I enjoy researching and spending a lot of time with and looking into the evolution of them, the pressures that impact them, whatever. If you were to say, have you heard the recent theory about artiodactyl diversification? I would be no, because I don't really care about artiodactyl diversification. It's not that I literally don't care about it. It's just not on the forefront of my interest.
Right.
It's not something that I have any background in. And because I've got no background in it, I almost have no business discussing it with people who actually do know the subject well. And plus, as people who care quite a bit about evolution, which is completely independent as a mechanism from abiogenesis, the actual event and process, it's almost just I don't, regardless of which hypothesis ends up winning out, it doesn't change the fact that evolution is a mechanism that is constantly active and has been since the dawn of time.
Yeah, yeah, and it's the same thing with a lot of other science things. Like, oh, did you? It's like if someone wanted to have a debate about like why the strong nuclear force has such a dramatic fall off in strength over distance. I'm just like, I mean, okay, it's fine to have that debate, but it's not going to be me who's having it. You need to talk to someone else about that, because like, is it an interesting question that's somewhat mysterious in physics? Yes. I just have no way to have that discussion, and quite frankly, whatever the answer is will be fine with me. I don't care what the answer is. I just care that there be an answer. And I also want to say we got a $10 super chat from Speed of Sound of Gravity, who says this IRS payment can't be that important. Pay to the order of Dapper Dino instead.
Good on you, Speed.
Yes. I will not tell the IRS that you were paying me in preference to them.
The IRS.
Hey, I'll kill fewer people with that money than the IRS will.
He's talking about the taxes.
Oh, I know.
Death and taxes.
Actually, I just recently finally got the my tax return back. I was like, oh, that took long enough.
Yeah, well.
Thanks, guys.
I think we might be able to blame some extenuating circumstances.
I know.
Just maybe for once, it's not 100% their fault.
Can I just blame them anyway because it makes me feel better?
Yes, you can. That is
Okay.
100% allowed.
Awesome.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting. I think that so there was something kind of weird. Originally the Brain Trust was supposed to have an after show on Maddox's channel, but then they never had it. At least I got tagged in Twitter on something by something with regard to that, and then I went to it later after the debate, and I was like, I wonder why they didn't have it. It was probably something benign, but I also like to think that like my pet theory is that they listened to Fuzz chat and then they were like, ooh, Fuzz is just agreeing on way too many things. Like, we don't need to be, it would be very hard to go in on that debate and be like, Fuzz was 100% correct about abiogenesis, and then deny the fact that Fuzz was also very keen on copping to the fact that evolution seems very evident.
Yeah. Oh, and for $5 from Vandali 1998, we have you had a debate where your creationist opponent hasn't gone off topic?
Never. But I also go off topic too. So I think going off topic in a debate is almost inevitable unless you have like a super strict moderator, which if you do, it tends to not be as fun anyways. But that's just my thoughts.
Well, I think it depends on to what degree you go off topic.
Yeah, I think that's true too. Yeah.
Yeah, like if Dr. Rana had started talking about like his opinions on like Republican versus Imperial Roman statuary, I would be like, what are you doing? Why is this a thing?
Yeah.
Like, that's just way out there, which, by the way, I have opinions. I don't talk about them here because, again, it's not what everyone here is here for.
Are you telling me the construction of 80s Transformers toys is not relevant to the discussion?
No, I mean, and that's one of the things is usually creationists will drag it into like tangential areas that are, I can't really say that they're on topic, but they're just, they're not entirely off topic. Like when they go origins or bust, right? Like, oh, what about in a debate about human evolution? Like, what about abiogenesis? It's like, what about it? Like,
yeah.
What do you want?
And the thing is that when we had originally agreed on the topic, we were talking, like the way James had phrased it to me was molecules to man evolution, which would include abiogenesis.
Yeah, that's true.
So I was kind of like, when we broached that, and I was eager to get Fuzz's opinion anyways, because like I said, he's a biochemist, and, regardless of whether or not we disagree on fundamentals, that's literally his field. It's worth hearing him out and hearing what he thinks about, why he finds these things to be implausible. So, yeah. and I might be able to disagree just on the fact too, and not that this is a good argument tactic, but I might be able to disagree just on the fact that it's like, why are you one of the very few biochemists who seems to be vocal about this as a problem? But then also that kind of almost begs the question of getting into that more, right? Asking further dissecting questions on the nature of why he finds it problematic. Maybe there really are problems. Maybe I would agree with the problem. So,
but we are
Dapper,
chemists,
can you highlight Smitty's most recent comment?
Oh, from the goo to the zoo to you. Oh, yeah.
Thank you for that, Smitty.
I do like those I find them amusing. The little weird, like rhymey mnemonics or whatever that creationists come up with.
Yeah, no, I actually find them very charming as well. I find them charming in the same way that I find like some of the art in Dinosaurs by Design. Like it has a bunch of very fun.
Oh yeah,
it's by Dwayne Gish, but whoever the artist was for that, they're just very charming.
I mean, look, I'm not going to say that creationism is devoid of creative merit and or artistic merit. That's not true. There's some great artwork. Like remember when we did that review of the museum tour video, Erika, that you and I did with
true.
There were some great models in there.
Oh, I mean, you can't knock the Ark Encounter for not, putting in the effort with regard to some of their Barrowmans that they put on there. Like some of those are well done.
Yeah. Oh, and we have a question, I think, for you, or at least it's relating to you. So Nesting20s says, at Depper Dino, I've heard that Erika likes standing for truth. Well, I don't. Has Erika seen the video I made about how dishonest they can be? Maybe she likes them for other reasons.
Yeah. So Nestle, that's actually a great question. I think that of the entire Brain Trust, that is to say, everyone who's involved over at Standing for Truth's channel, every interaction that I've had with Standing for Truth personally has been very enjoyable, and when things are things tend to be most civil with him, and he also tends to be one of the only ones of the group who, when you kind of get him on a topic, he'll be like, okay, I'll look into that. So I enjoy interacting with Stand for Truth, the person. The channel itself, as you could probably see from some of my own videos, I can be rather critical because I feel very similarly. I feel that in many ways they kind of, if not outright, omit the truth, they certainly obfuscate it. So it's kind of a complicated issue. But I can definitely see where you're coming from. I also think, everyone here would agree too that Standing has not been the best of moderators when he's been on other people's channels. Which is not a great way to be. I mean, maybe it was none of his business, I guess, but at the same time, it would have been nice to have an ambassador, like for when Dapper was over on John Maddox's channel with the lot of them.
Yeah, I will say that I feel like Standing is sort of in the ringleader position, in a way that I don't really think a lot of, like our little, because we have a group of people that we confer with, and Erika's in there, and Dakota's in there, TD Lane is in there, Colton is in there, RJ is in there. We've got a bunch of people. I don't really think we have a ringleader like that though, but Standing does seem to be one. But I think he's becoming increasingly bad at actually performing that function, and I feel like it's increasingly. Or it's less and less fruitful to have discussions on panels on Standing's channel and on channels associated with that whole Brain Trust group.
Well, I think part of the issue is that some of the members can be a bit vitriolic, and Standing, because he's friends with them, I feel like he's just less likely to call them out. Yeah. Which isn't great when you're trying to have a productive conversation.
And the thing is, It bugs me because it's not. I would certainly call any of you out if you started behaving inappropriately. In fact,
I hope you would.
Yeah. In fact, I've called Erika out for not necessarily being rude, but simply not giving someone a chance to actually get their say in.
I interrupt sometimes.
Yeah, and the thing is that that needs to be a two-way street. If Standing and crew want to have open dialogues where people who disagree with them actually feel comfortable popping in and having a discussion, they need to get that under control. And quite frankly, there's at least a few people that they probably should just stop having on.
Well, yeah, that's the thing. There's a reason why our entire group doesn't really go and hang out on their kind of open panels anymore. And that's just because there's a respect there that is not going both ways.
Right.
And particularly, when you've got someone like Dan, who, our evolutionary biology professor friend, who would go on there completely in good faith to have conversations and try to pick their brains on why they think the way that they do and genuinely answer their questions. very quickly has devolved many times into like ad hom interrupting fests, where Dan is just like, frankly, just getting abused by a group of people who are not handling the power in an amicable way, I would say.
Oh, and it turns out, so Vandalia 1998 is actually the puppet ringleader. He's pulling all of our strings from the shadows.
Yeah, absolutely the truth. Don't out yourself like that.
Yeah, now it's out of the bag. Now everyone knows. Time to shut it down. So there is one thing, and this is changing topics again, but it's getting much more onto the Fuzz Rana thing. I think there needs to be more of a discussion, maybe with Dr. Rana, about what language is and what it means, and not necessarily because I disagree with him, but because I don't feel like it was very well defined in your discussion or in discussions in general. Like, we talk about human language as if it's, and it is this thing that's distinct from anything that any other animals are currently doing. But what is it that makes something a language, and what is it that, like, what is the difference between human languages and other, like, say, various primate communication systems where they might have different calls that refer to different things? Because that's, essentially a word. And I don't know that anyone has really had that discussion in this context of the sort of, what do we want to do about what it means to be human from, say, Dr. Rana's point of view versus, say, yours? Yeah,
and Dr. Rana definitely draws a line that has a lot to do with behavior. And typically in ecology, right, like, an individual is not going to draw a line strictly based off of behavior, typically. Now, sometimes a little bit, like, what RJ had mentioned this in a chat later that we were having kind of off screen, but, mating at different times of the day, that technically is a behavior, but it's also a reproductive isolation. So I think behavior alone tends to not be a specifier with regards to denoting species, but at the same time, it is a worthy conversation of having. And that's kind of why, like, when I was talking with Dr. Rana, I was like, when we're discussing communication systems, because language is obviously a communication system, and so is every way by which any other animal, sends and receives and interprets a message. So while not all communication systems are languages, all languages are communication systems. So you can kind of have that type of conversation, because the truth is that there is a very weird gradient in the primates, and I'm sure this work has been done in, like, cetaceans as well, and maybe even, like, pachyderms, to see how they communicate with one another. But anytime you've got a bunch of social species with large brain to body ratios, you're going to have some weird communication stuff going on.
Yeah, there's actually, like, a valid question right now is, do cetaceans, specifically dolphins, have a language or languages?
So they have cultural communication systems where calls are learned behaviors and not instinctual. But that actually gets into the question of what makes a communication system a language. And I actually have some ideas on that. Because while technically I'm not a linguist, I do actually have a fairly significant background reading and study in linguistics in general. And I can go on about linguistics in ways that are similar to the ways I can go on about things like dinosaurs. So let me run this by the chat and the panel here. Right after I read a $2 super chat from Jake4D, who says, all language is a shortcut for expressing an idea. I don't know that I would agree with shortcut, but it is certainly a system for expressing ideas. So I would say languages, the big thing that makes a communication system a language, as opposed to simply a system of non-linguistic calls or gestures or something else like that, is the ability to reference both actions and things to make sure that we can unambiguously portray agent and patient relationships in the utterances or whatever method you're using, right? And the other thing that is important is that it be able to reference these ideas without actual instances of these things being present. So for instance, if you have, say, a group of monkeys that have the different alarm calls for eagles versus jaguars, like you were saying, Erika, right?
Yes.
You can't, without losing standing in the group, have those monkeys talking about jaguars in some abstract sense, right? The call doesn't just mean jaguar. It means there's a jaguar here right now. Everyone go up into the trees and hide. It contains not just the idea of the actual animal, but it includes the very clear implication that that animal is here right now. This is an emergency. Whereas I can talk about horribly dangerous things that any of you, if present, would flee from, but I can do it in a way that that I'm not saying it's here right now. We're having a conversation about this idea. So I can reference, crocodiles. And by me saying crocodile, none of you feel like you suddenly need to move away from large bodies of water that might be in your vicinity.
Dapper. I mean, just to briefly interject too, there's another excellent study that I didn't have a chance to bring up, but there's another study not on Diana monkeys, but rather on Campbell's monkeys, and they have the ability to essentially alter the meanings of certain calls by adding suffixes. So that's another complete, completely different, like kind of derived form of communications. They've got these major calls, crack, hawks, and booms, which is just kind of, they're named after what they kind of sound like.
Mm-hmm.
But for instance, a crack might mean that a leopard is present, but a crackoo indicates like some kind of unspecified danger. So they can change, they can alter the meanings by adding little suffixes to them, which is huge. I mean, that's a gigantic step forward with regard to like what makes something just a basal communication versus a language.
It is, but I still think that some of the biggest things that we're going to have to, in order to come up with a communication system and say this is a language, I think the ability to clearly differentiate and reference both agent and patient, as well as to reference things that are not actually either temporally or like in terms of distance, local to whatever utterance is going on. So and the agent patient thing is basically the what does what to whom. So languages in human language handle this relationship differently, but they all have ways of expressing the idea of what thing is the thing that's acting, what is the action, and what is it acting upon, if anything.
Yep.
Whereas, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to add on to that and say, like, a lot of times, some of the hominoids, when we do experiments like with classically is Kanzi, right? Kanzi could understand, like, they put Kanzi in a room. Kanzi was a chimpanzee, or a bonobo, actually, for everyone out there wondering. And he has this lexicon that he can press buttons onto to form sentences that a robot voice will then dictate. And you can use them to ask for things or demand things or express certain feelings that he's feeling or whatever. But he can also understand language to a degree, human language to a degree, in a way that no other, like dogs, for instance, couldn't. So you could put him in a room with a toy refrigerator and a bunch of items, and you could say, Kanzi, put the pine needles into the refrigerator. And he's capable of hearing you say that as a human, picking up the pine needles, walking over to the toy refrigerator and putting them in there. But if you say, put the pine needles and the blueberries into the refrigerator, that he can't do that. Incapable of understanding grammatical, complicated sentences and grammar.
Yeah. Now, I would say that right there, that level of communication is where there really is a question as to what degree that actually counts as language use, because that means that Kanzi is, at least to some level, being able to differentiate the agent and patient in the situation. So the pine needles are the patient, he is the agent, and the action is taking these needles and putting them in the refrigerator, which itself is another reference that he needs to be able to understand, that's an additional thing that is involved in this. Now, it would be a very simple form of language, but languages can be simple. I don't think they have to be complicated in order to count as languages. But I don't see that in naturally occurring communication systems outside of humans.
No, and the question would be, what pressures would lead to that, and have those pressures been essentially applied? Because with humans, and the hominins in general, there was an enormous pressure for being able to communicate over long distances, essentially. So I'm over here and you're over there, and I'm trying to tell you to, go around the buffalo on the other side or the antelope on the other side so that we can hunt it. you know, and really, like, let's say we're looking at like Erectus or something like that. Because Fuzz was right. There is this sudden explosion of brain case size that we see like in early Homo, where, you know, you're going from something that's 550 to 600 to 900, 1000 cubic centimeters, which is just absolutely insane.
Right.
So all of a sudden there's this huge pressure, and a lot of anthropologists think that pressure was language and communication. So what would have been the pressures for that, and why don't those pressures exist today? Well, when we look at the organisms that are closest to what we would have been, which would be the chimpanzees, first and foremost, it's habitat. And second of all, it's hierarchy and social order, which would have both been substantially different, at least in early Homo. So, you know, you see a lot of what seems to be a social and behavioral adaptation, which makes sense because in pretty much all organisms, like a unifying concept across evolutionary biology is that behavior precedes morphologic change.
Right. And it seems like it would have to. I mean, it's obviously going to be easier for you to do something that you weren't doing with the same anatomy that you had before than it is to change your anatomy and then start doing something new with it, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And also, I want to point out that Nestlig has referenced a new paper, which is Action Sound Shape Congruencies Explain Sound Symbolism, which is from 3 days ago, apparently. And that was published in Nature by Konstantina Margiottudi, I think. Goodness. People are like, oh, Dapper, you're so great at the languages. And I try to say a name, and it's like, I don't know.
No, listen, pronunciation is not my strong suit either. So
that's actually one of the things that confuses me a little bit about Fuzz Rana with his genome.
Oh yeah, genome.
And also his strange insistence on using terminology usually restricted to talking about subfamilies when he's talking about specific species. Like he'll say
erectines, yeah.
Yeah, like what? I don't know if you talked to him much before or after, but like, did he ever explain why he treats these specific species as if they were like above genus level groups of animals?
Yeah, I didn't ask, and you know, I didn't want to be. Obviously, I wasn't trying to be condescending because God knows his education is insanely higher than mine right now. He probably, I'm thinking he probably knows the difference, and he's just doing it as kind of a personal shorthand. You know.
Okay. I mean,
yeah, like I think he knows that anthropologists probably don't do that. I don't think he cares. I think that it's just something that is helpful to him for referencing.
I guess that could be, yeah. It just strikes me as very odd because it's clear that he's not clueless about the subject, right?
Oh, no way. Yeah, he actually told me before we hopped in, or maybe he said this like during the middle of I can't remember when he said it, but we were discussing, you know, anthropology in general, and he was like, yeah, I'm like super into it as like a side hobby. And so he was like, I think if I could do it all over again, like I would seriously consider just going into anthropology. And I was like, yeah, anthropology is fun as hell, so I get it. Like, you know?
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's good. It was, and it's not like it's a big criticism or anything I have. It's just a weird little thing that I've seen him do, but no one else. And it's
I don't know why he does that.
Yeah.
I feel like I've missed something, which I probably have.
So
yeah, TD walked off for a minute, and he said that.
So TD Lane, so if Dr. Rana has this tendency. So, okay, in taxonomy, the IN ending usually refers to subfamilies, whereas like the ID ending on like hominid is a family, hominin is a subfamily, and hominini, if you get the extra I at the end, is a tribe, which is below subfamily. Which, granted, I mean, we're talking about these ranked taxa, which is essentially meaningless because the ranks are arbitrary, but those are long-standing rules in taxonomic like terminology. But Dr. Rana will say things like he'll say habilines when he's referencing Homo habilis individuals, and the normal implication there would be that he is talking about a subfamily, but he's not, because all of genus. Now, Erika, I might be wrong about this, so fix me if I am. But if I remember correctly, basically all of Australopithecus and Homo are in hominini.
Yes, if memory serves, I believe so.
So they're all not only in the same, they're at least in the same subfamily, hominin, right? Because that would be everything that's closer to Homo sapiens than it is to Pan, right?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
and I believe they're even in the same tribe in most cases. So
Yeah,
hominini would be the tribes.
Yeah, the line that you're running down lineage speaking. Yes.
So we have for $2 from Vandelli 1998. Is it easier to be a debater or a moderator? For me, I mean, it's certainly easier to just be a moderator because all I have to do is like keep time and tell people to shut up when they start interrupting. That's basically it. Or if we're being strict, I can sometimes redirect it back onto topic. But yeah, I would say overall, it takes less effort to moderate. I mean, you still have to pay attention and you still need to be on the ball, but like you're not the one who has to sit there and come up with rebuttals or anything like that.
Oh,
that
yeah. Moderating is way easier.
Yeah. That being said, I don't think it's the more fun thing. I actually enjoy the when I like to have a debate where there's a friendly adversarial kind of thing going on, right? Like we're trying to get in points and we don't necessarily agree and we want to have the better argument, but it's not a vitriolic or like too emotionally charged.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And back to what I was saying to Neslick, like that's why I do enjoy having conversations with Standing for Truth. You can say a lot about the guy. I think that he's really incorrect on a lot of his science, obviously, but yeah, he's a great person to have a debate with, just because he's civil. That really is what it boils down to. After engaging with enough creationists. And just people who are kind of into like what I would certainly say is kind of pseudoscience in general, you come to find out that a lot of them are really angry. And it makes it very difficult to have a conversation when the other person just hates your guts on the basis that they don't think the same way as you do. And I have certainly had conversations with creationists that have gone that direction. So it's always that talk to Standing and have like a civil discourse.
That sounds like a John Maddox discussion.
Yeah, or a Nathan Thompson discussion.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, I'm sorry that happened.
Yeah, it's, I mean,
actually,
that's the thing that it's kind of weird because like Smokey and Maddox are friends, but I've also had conversations with Smokey and Smokey was very easy to talk to. And I mean, I very much disagree with a lot of what Smokey says. I also think that he's got some really not okay social positions. But at least our conversation was civil. I don't think that I can say the same for most of my discussion with Maddox. He chilled out in the end, but
So
I don't know.
I think so. A few times we've mentioned that some of these creationists who we think we can have fruitful or at least pleasant dialogue with are friends with people who we would consider essentially not worth the wasting time on. And I think Maddox, if he continues on this route of being essentially just triggered at the drop of a hat, he's trending that way. I think he's still probably worth talking to. But I think one of the reasons that these people remain friends is because when they have conversations, that's not how they are internally.
Right. Well, and Maddox inherently, I can't say this for certain, but I get the vibe that when he's like talking to someone who he disagrees with, he genuinely treats it like a battle or something like that. Where it's very us versus them oriented. And I could be completely off base, maybe that's not how he is at all, but just in my interactions with them and in people that I care about's interactions with them, that seems to be kind of the direction. Whereas, with Standing, it's genuinely like, I feel like I could get a beer with Standing and have like a conversation about that without anybody getting so mad that they like flip a table. But things tend to get really heated, at least in the conversations that I've seen that involve like some others, like Maddox or like Nathan Thompson.
Yeah. And look, Maddox, on the off chance that you read this, you do not want to be associated with Nathan Thompson if you can avoid that. So you might want to pump the brakes on the anger. Also, for $5 from Vandelli 1998, just wondering, referencing his earlier super chat about moderating, because I remember one debate where Erika was moderating and Jackson's opponent brought up something in Erika's field, and I saw her face.
Oh, yeah. It's really difficult when you're moderating. I think that was in his chat with Anderson. yeah, it would have had to have been Jackson's chat with Anderson. But yeah, Anderson said some stuff that if I'm remembering correctly, it was like human evolution based. And I was just like, astrally projected from my body after he said it. I was like, oh my God, oh yeah, you know what? It was chromosome 2. That was it. He was talking about chromosome 2. Chromosome 2 has been totally overturned. And I was like, this guy is like, what is Anderson again? Is he biochemist?
I don't know.
He's got some actual degree though. And when he said that, I was like, how is it possible that someone with his education holds that position? You know, and Anderson is a very sweet guy, like from the pre-show and like during and whatever, his behavior was really sweet. And then I was just, microbio, thank you, Walker. Yeah, and I was just like, holy cow. I don't even know what to say about that. Like, that's got to be a level at which you're like actively avoiding any material on the subject so that your current position doesn't get challenged.
Oh, yeah. And Anderson also didn't really understand phylogenetics and didn't want to actually discuss them. I made this. More so upon request of, I think it was Jackson. So, yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay. Well, yes, I love this. Wait, it's all genetics? Always has been.
It's true, too.
Okay, yeah, to Walker's point, I actually did not know that, Walker, but that is very funny. Dapper, I didn't even know you were an atheist extremist.
You don't even know that I'm an atheist at all.
Yeah, true. That's actually true. No, Dapper likes to keep his philosophical positions under wraps.
Yeah, specifically because it's off topic to literally everything I talk about as Dapper Dino.
My entire philosophical position is I don't know. So I'm just very much okay with that. Like, people are like, what do you think about, this was supernatural, whatever. I'm like, man, I don't know. Don't ask me. I literally don't know the answer.
So this is, I think I must have missed Desseldrace's initial comment about this, but he says, curious, any response to my point about Einstein's redefinition of space and time as it relates to your criticism of Sal Cordova? Dapper is a man of mystery. Didn't mean to highlight that one, but it's true. I am a very mysterious dinosaur. So about the redefinition of time and space by Einstein, I think there's a few things. One is, I'm not really sure that it was so much of a redefinition as the pointing out that what had previously been defined can be interpreted in more than one way, and that it has properties that had been previously not well understood. So one of the things is, what is space in a physics sense? It is essentially a set of directions and distances which allow vectors to be calculated and observed. And time is simply the observation that change occurs in the universe, and this change can be measured. And so there is a thing that is time, that is what the change occurs in. So all changes are embedded within time simply because that's what time is. It is the change occurring in the universe. And Einstein didn't really change that fact. Space and time, he just found, were linked in ways that they can be distorted, and distorting one necessarily distorts the other. That's not really a change in definition. And the other thing is that it leaves all of classical mechanics essentially intact at all of the scales at which it was previously successfully operating on. And one of the things you got to remember is classical mechanics works for everything from intermolecular interactions in air and water and all this stuff. Classical mechanics describes that extremely well. And it goes all the way up to, interplanetary spaceflight. Like when NASA's sending things to Mars, they're not going into in-depth, general relativistic calculations. They're just using things like Kepler's laws and Newton's laws, right? They're still using force equals ma, and they're not factoring in tiny fractions of the speed of light as a conversion factor to account for time dilation.
If you aren't, engineer here, if you aren't calibrating satellite times and bouncing back for basically internet delay, you don't need relativity to be an engineer at all.
Yeah. So I don't really think that anything was redefined there. It's that definitions were refined, not changed. And the other thing to remember is that the older somewhat more naive definitions of, or not definitions, but descriptions of space and time remain the most serviceable versions of those ideas in almost everything that anyone does. You have to be extremely specialized in terms of what kinds of physics you're doing to make that be a difference. And so if someone were to come up with some new definition for fitness, or some clarification on the definition of fitness that only operated under extreme lengths of time or in strange extreme environments, I mean, okay, that might be reasonable. But until we have observations that do not match, we don't get to just say that we're going to redefine fitness. And one of the reasons that Einstein had to do all of this stuff is because there were observations that were coming in that did not agree well with Newton. For instance, there was things like the precession of the aphelion of Mercury. Basically, Mercury was its orbit itself was rotating around the sun in a way that was not predicted by Einstein. And there were some ideas maybe there's a planet even closer to the sun. It was hypothetically named Vulcan after the god of the forge from Greek mythology. There were ideas about how we could account for this. And it turns out that what was actually right was that there was a difference in what we thought about time space-time versus what it really was. But yeah, so abandoning absolute simultaneity isn't a change. Well, it's not a change in the definition of space or time, I would say, but it is certainly a change because simultaneity had been previously assumed as being absolute. Turns out it was incorrect. And the thing is, when Sal comes up with observations that cannot be accommodated under the current definition of fitness, then I think it's time to revisit that definition. I mean, would you agree, Erika?
Yeah.
Yes.
The thing is, you have to have a reasonable data set to chat that. Okay, let me rephrase this. You have to have a reasonable data set that challenges the methodology we currently use to assess such data, in order to propose that we completely overturn the current paradigm. That the example of relativity and Einstein versus classical physics it's a perfect example, right? Because classical physics was incapable of explaining something, so we had to come up with a way that could actually be parsimonious with the data set.
Yeah.
So I 100% agree, but the problem is there's not an issue with the current definition of of fitness.
Fitness, right. It hasn't failed.
Yeah.
Sal isn't giving evidence for why, actual examples of the why the definition of fitness doesn't work. He's literally just his argument is, well, genetic entropy doesn't work with this, so it doesn't work.
Also, most of when Sal redefines, he doesn't. His new definitions don't answer most of the criticisms that the original version of genetic entropy still has.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's okay. I'm not saying it's dishonest in the sense that I think that Sal is intentionally trying to mislead people. What I'm saying is it's a dishonest argumentation tactic, because rather than actually addressing the criticisms head on, it is simply trying to skirt around them using semantics to avoid the actual scientific problems. And that's not really an option. Like, you can say, oh, I'm, for the purposes of this debate, going to define fitness as X. But the problem is that when you do that, in Sal's case, it's like, okay, well, you can define it that way, and we can say that, sure, maybe fitness does decline in some populations over time. First, you haven't even really proven that. You claimed it, and we've seen some things that you say are examples, and under your somewhat idiosyncratic definition, maybe they are examples. But if the question is, does that lead to long-term inevitable extinction of essentially every genetic lineage? No, it doesn't. And that's the real question, because the idea behind genetic entropy is everything's going so downhill that everything's going to go extinct eventually, just because it has been around too long, essentially, is what it comes down to. The genetic code will just degrade away into nonsense, and then we'll go extinct. Well, no, because then you're using the actual reproductive fitness definition, and that isn't happening. And if you want to have a discussion about some other kind of fitness, I guess you could do that, but it's not going to be supporting your long-term case of genetic entropy, therefore eventual extinction, therefore we have to have a recent special creation of these genetic lineages.
Yeah, you cannot. Yeah, you can't start off an argument about like the concept of. Let's make a different example. You can't create an argument about evolution and then in your opener change the definition of evolution.
Right.
I mean, then the other person is like, that's just not what we agreed to discuss.
Exactly. And now it is the case that, definitions change over time. But one of the things you have to remember, because there was another thing that came up, was like, what about the linguistics of, definitions change in linguistics all the time. It's called a semantic shift, right? Where a word changes its semantic meaning, which is, we can find lots of examples throughout, like the word.
Day old time.
Yeah, there's that. There's the word awful has changed from meaning something which causes someone to be filled with awe and wonder and some fear to something which is just very bad. So those are semantic shifts, right? But the thing is that in science, because we're dealing with things like, actual measurements and observations and things, we need to have very clear definitions that are used to talk about things very exactly in a way that is not common in just regular old parlance. And so if we go back to, say, like an anatomy thing, right? Like if I say, the second phalange on digit 1 of the manus, you have to know exactly what that means. And I'm sure Erika does, say, for example. Like if I told you that was the bone I was holding, you know exactly what bone I'm holding, right?
No, of course.
Right. So, you might not know left or right because I didn't specify, but like...
No, but it's a mirror image. So
right. So it doesn't matter a whole lot.
Yes. So
that's the thing. Those words need to be very, very clearly and exactly defined, because in science, you have to talk about very specific things in very unambiguous ways, because vagueness is basically just the death knell of all your technical work. No one can interpret it well enough to say whether you're right or wrong if you're just going to be vague. And if I said, this hand bone was big in this fossil ape, it's like, what does that mean?
Yep, absolutely.
So yeah, that's one of the reasons why in science we have to be much more careful with definitions than we can be in just sort of everyday language.
Yep. Case in point, why you can't use colloquial language usage and map that directly onto science.
Right, which actually I had a video about.
Yep, that's exactly what I was alluding to.
Yep. So we had it was Raw Matt, right?
Yeah, it was Raw Matt.
Yeah, Raw Matt tried this argument about humans not being apes, basically on the standpoint that the common usage of the word ape doesn't tend to include humans. And technically he's right, it doesn't usually. When people say apes, they usually are not including humans. But the thing is that when we say humans are apes, we're saying that humans are hominoids. But the problem is that most people don't know the word hominoid. That's not something that just rolls off the tip of their tongue all the time. And ape is the closest word to the technical word hominoid that we have that is a word general English-speaking public will understand. So it's the same thing with birds or dinosaurs. I can say Aves is nested within Dinosauria, but most general audience English speakers are not going to have a clear idea as to what that means because those are unfamiliar terms. So I have to go with the more colloquial birds are dinosaurs, even though exactly what a dinosaur means in colloquial English is not very well defined. And if you come up with a good definition for it, it actually won't map exactly onto the clade Dinosauria.
Yep.
So we have that problem with common language. This is why science abandoned it, at least biology, all the way back at Carlos Linnaeus, right?
Oh, yeah. No, I mean, that's the name of the game, right? It's got to be, that's also why we use Latin for binomial nomenclature, so that there's no confusion about what anyone across multiple countries across the globe is talking about.
Yeah. If I say, to use one of my favorite binomials because it's the one that Kent Hovind always gets wrong. If we go with canis latrans, right? Even if you don't speak English, if you see that in writing, you can type it into a search engine, whatever language you're using, and it will come up with the coyote, whatever you might happen to call that thing. In fact, you might speak a language that doesn't have a separate word for coyote, but it doesn't matter. The species is going to pop up when you type in canis latrans.
Yep.
And-
I mean, yeah, that's the long and short of it. Is that this is one of those things that if you're in any biologically based or tangential field, right, you're gonna understand that the nomenclature is important, and you're going to understand the meaning of the word both in regular language, common language, and in the scientific kind of connotation. And that's why it's so alarming to hear someone like Ramat coming on camera and like proposing that the English usage should completely overturn the scientific consensus.
Right. It's very bizarre because that's the exact opposite of what we should be hoping for as people who are concerned about things like science. We would hope that science infiltrates into the popular culture, which then causes changes in the popular culture to more closely align it with things that are true that are known to be true via science. But instead, here's Ramat saying, nope, it's the exact opposite. Because I use a word in a way that isn't scientific, scientists should also not be scientific about that topic.
Yep.
Nope, that's not at all what should be happening. No.
Yeah, yeah. The whole deal is very frustrating, and you almost have to stop. Like you want to avoid being the killjoy at the party who's like, hold on a second. It's actually technically correct to call humans and all of the great apes monkeys because we are catarrhines, and as well as haplorhines. But it's just it's going to for that permeates popular culture.
And whales are fish again because they're sarcopterygians. So
true, yes. True.
But then again, so is basically everything else that you're going to name that's a vertebrate. It's just a fish. So and again, that's where we get into that problem. Like when you say fish, people know what you mean. But we also recognize that fish doesn't map closely onto any particular taxon.
Yeah, it's oh yes, true. Megan Fox's giant boobs. We are also simiiforms, anthropoid primates.
Yep.
So what are you gonna do? Well, guys, I'm getting ready to head out and go pick up some ingredients for making dinner this evening. Do we have anything else we want to touch on?
Well, I mean, I think we pretty well covered not only the I keep struggling to call it a debate because it really was more of a friendly discussion. I guess I don't have a whole lot. I'll go through some channel news and then I'll have everyone give a last word if that works out for everybody.
By all means.
Yeah, I actually want to make a note as a mod in chat. And you know who you are in chat. If you are going to make an argument in chat about genetic entropy and such, and then immediately retract your message afterwards and repeatedly do that, I will consider that trolling. So don't do that.
Fair enough. I do not disagree as a channel owner. All right, so quick channel news. Let's see. This Tuesday will be a Lyle with Landon, and then next Tuesday, currently the plan is Eric with Erika.
Hell yeah. So
I actually still have to find exactly which Eric Hovind video I want. So Erika, if you find one, let me know. Let's see. Then Thursday, right now it's looking like I'm going to get another Speculative Evolution Project video done by Thursday. So we'll have another update on that project with 8 new creatures, maybe 7, maybe 9, it depends on how much I get done. But that should be then. Then Saturday after that, I believe I have something planned, but I have to double check. So I think something is already in the works for that. And then we'll be back to Kent with Bent. So we're giving Bent a couple weeks off. Also, Eric with Erika is going to be earlier than Kent with Bent is. One of the reasons for that is I've been noticing that occasionally I end up running over several other content creators who I know have audience that overlaps with mine. And so I'm trying to avoid that by setting it back to an earlier time. And Bent can't make it that earlier time, but Erika can. And we always have fun on Eric with Erika. So
yeah, we try not to impede friends of the channel.
Right. And actually, it turns out that sometimes it's impeding like 3 or 4 different friends of the channel at the same time. And it's just like, oh my goodness.
We need to have a staggered schedule.
Well, the problem is it's hard with that many people because some people can only be there at certain times and whatnot. So
That's the truth.
From Vandalion 1998 for $5, we have Erika. Did you ever figure out your I think it's Monday's schedule to talk about the primate bottleneck? Okay.
Yeah, me and Vandelli are gonna hash it out on Twitter.
Okay. And also for 50 kroners, Erika, did you ever watch the Evolution is a Blind Watchmaker video by CDK007?
No, I have not seen that, but I can add that to my list of things that I need to watch. I mean,
I have
it's
seen it
always
before. It is
growing.
an interesting video.
Yeah.
Also, a question from Smitty. Can you do other Erics besides Hovend?
We can. Yeah, if there's another Eric that you would like us to pick apart, I mean, let me know. And ultimately, here's the thing: like, it's not actually super important that there be a correspondence between the names. It's just fun.
It's funny, yeah.
Yeah.
It'd be fun to do an Erika with Erika, in which like we do a mock creationism debate where one of us plays the creationist.
Actually, I think some of us could be pretty decent creationists. We know the arguments pretty darn well. That's actually
we need to be courted by AIG. That's the thing. We could. I worry because if we do a good enough job, they'll reach out to us and pay us the big bucks. We might do turncoat just for the money.
I mean, they have to be paying people like Georgia Porter reasonably well for her to sell out that badly.
Yeah. The thing is that honestly, it would have to be. I don't even know that there is an appropriate number that would get me to just completely sell out like that.
Oh, Erika, come on. If you were being offered $1 million a year, you would do it.
It's tempting. That's the thing. It's really tempting, but I don't know. I don't know if I'd be able to sleep at night.
Also,
sure you would. You would sleep on your
AIG
gigantic
contact
12-foot
pile of money with my gold infused like wool blanket and my
right.
Well, here's the thing.
Exactly. That's how you would sleep at night.
And I'm waiting
very
Ken.
comfortably. Yeah.
We happen to know a person who has jokingly, I'm not going to say who they are, who has jokingly said that they will write under a pseudonym for the creationists and then debunk it.
Yeah, that was a fun idea.
Take the money and run.
So one thing I will say actually about I think all of us could be, like, if we wanted to do the dishonest, just pretend to be a creationist, I think all of us would be pretty darn convincing as creationists. And here's the big reason. All of us can actually describe creationism in a way that creationists will agree with. That, yes, we have adequately explained their position.
Oh, yeah. Steelmaning creationism is the easiest thing in the world.
The reverse is almost never true.
No. And the thing is that when it is true, the conversation gets vague very fast.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah. And so this is my advice to any creationists who are out there watching this, either now or in the future. Find someone who accepts evolution, who is actually knowledgeable about it, not just someone who's like, yeah, they said that in high school, so I guess sure, why not? Like someone, like someone on this panel, right? And see if you can actually describe to them what you think evolution is. And when they say, yes, that is an accurate description, now you know enough to adequately argue against it. Because until you can do that, you are arguing against something that no one believes, which is pointless. And it's what you almost always do. So please stop it. Don't do that anymore. But I think that's pretty much it.
I actually need to ask Icarus, what's the strawman argument? I need you to specifically point out because I don't want to strawman positions.
Oh yeah, let them know in the chat. But I'm going to go around the panel and get final thoughts or words, and then we're going to kick them off. Dakota, what do you got for us?
I like to combine two hot takes I've been sitting on. I don't think body plans have changed within Arclade since Cercopter genes.
Okay.
I don't think that's
combining
too
fish and body plans.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think distal digits for sure. But
I think I know what he's talking about.
Okay. All right.
Good night,
Later.
Around.
All right. I guess now TD Lane is up next because it shifted everything around. So we're just going to go with TD Lane next. TD Lane, what do you got for us as your final thoughts?
My final thought is basically Erika did well in her debate. This after show was fun, and I'm quite looking forward to Monday because that's when I register for college.
Nice. Congratulations. All right. Well, you're getting out of here. All right, Erika. Any final thoughts?
I enjoyed it. I'm hoping to get Fuzz on my channel as well to have an additional conversation. And
That would be cool.
Or I think it'd be really fun. And before I duck out of here, I guess I would say, oh yeah. On Monday, my Standing for Truth book on why human evolution is false's book club is starting. So get ready, get hyped for that. It's gonna be sassy. It's gonna be fun. And I think I might live stream it. I'm not sure. So with that,
I would be very down to hop on a live stream if that were going on.
Yeah,
Just
not.
let me know.
The thing is, I already recorded the first couple of episodes, so I'm not sure if I'm like they're not like wholly edited or anything yet. So it wouldn't be a huge loss. I would just consider it a practice, but I'm gonna sit on it and think.
Okay.
All right, I'm dipping out of here, Daps.
All right. See you later, Erika. Thank you for coming over, and I hope you have a good dinner.
Thanks for having me. See ya.
Bye. All right. Well, that is it for me. Thank you very much for stopping by. I'm sorry that some of you may have wandered into a stream that is not what you were expecting for today, but it also isn't what I was expecting for today. So thank you very much. I want to say a special thank you to all of our super chatters. So we have, let's see, we've got Danish Debater, Speed of Sound of Gravity, Vandalia 1998, and Jake 4D, who are all people who have helped support the channel by super chatting. If you want to support the channel, there are a number of ways that you can do so. If you don't want to spend any money on it, which is very understandable, simply liking and sharing and watching the videos is a huge help. It pushes up the channel in the algorithm. But if you would like to have a more monetary way of supporting the channel, we have a number of ways. There's a Patreon link in the description. There's a merch store link in the description. There's also, you can join the channel as a member. And if you want to do the Patreon or membership, there are rewards for various tiers. But again, please feel free not to. Just a like and a share goes a long way towards growing the channel. So thank you very much, everybody. And I will talk to you on Tuesday